I'd like to begin today with a little bit of a trivia. So play along at home, see if you can get the answer. So question is, what do Canton, Ohio, Springfield, Massachusetts, Toronto, Ontario, and Cooperstown, New York have in common? If you want to shout out the answer, you could do that.
Halls of Fame.
Oh, look at that. We have a sports fan here. Yes, they are the home to the Hall of Fames of the major North American sports, the NFL, NBA, NHL, and Major League Baseball. I don't know how many of you guys been to one or all of them. I personally haven't been to any of them, I know, but hopefully one day I'll take my kids to at least a baseball Hall of Fame. But in the Hall of Fame, when you go there, you'll see a list of names of people who are considered the very best in their sport, people who exemplifies excellence and often are seen as sort of the heroes in their given sport. The Bible also has a Hall of Fame of faith, so to speak. And of course, I'm referring to Hebrews chapter 11, where it lists a whole bunch of names of people from the Old Testament who are commended for their exemplary faith. So when you read the chapter there, you'll see people such as Abel, Enoch, Noah, and of course, Abraham. But when you go through all the names listed in this Hall of Faith, there is a name that seems a little bit out of place. And I'm, of course, talking about the main character in our passage today, Rahab. And this is how the author of Hebrews describes Rahab in Hebrews 11. In verse 31, it says, "By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies." Now, when you, again, think about all the names that are listed in Hebrews 11, you see that Rahab is very unique. First, she's not an Israelite. All the other people in this chapter are either direct ancestors or descendants of Jacob. But Rahab, as we see in our story today, was a Canaanite living in Jericho. Not only is Rahab not an Israelite, but she is the only one of two women mentioned in Hebrews 11. The other, of course, being Sarah. And as many of you know, women historically have not been regarded as being important. And during the time of the Bible and time of the Old Testament, it was all about men. And the fact that her name, a woman's name, is included in this Hall of Faith is definitely worth noting. It's incredible, like when you think about it, that not just a woman, but a Canaanite woman was included in this list. Suggests that there was truly something special, something commendable in the faith that was displayed by Rahab. And I'd like to take this time to just look at two aspects of Rahab's faith that really stands out, and hopefully we can learn something from the kind of faith that she was able to show. So first, when we look at Rahab's story, we see that her faith was faith with action. The famous passage in James 2 says, "You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone." In the same way, was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? The author of James, again, is using the story of Rahab to demonstrate and to remind us that faith alone isn't really, he describes it as faith that is dead. And Rahab, we see in this story, not only did she believe that the God of Israel was the one true God, but she believed that she had faith in this belief to the extent that she put that faith into action. So when Rahab heard about what God of Israel had done, that we see in the passage today, she talks about how, we've heard about what your God had done to the Egyptians and to the Amorites, how your God parted the Red Sea. She says, I believe that your God, the God of Israel, is the one true God in the heavens above and on earth below. But she didn't just end there. She didn't just stop at the part of believing. But she took the next step of, because she believed that the gods of Canaan were not the one true God, but the God of Israel was more powerful and was the one true God, she took into action. She took faith into action. And she did that by taking the decisive action of risking her life, risking the life of her family by hiding the Israelite spies and helping them to escape capture. According to William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, he said, faith and work should travel side by side, step answering step, like the legs of man walking. First faith, and then works, and then faith again, and then works again, until they can scarcely distinguish which is the one and which is the other. It's the idea of, when we have faith, when we believe in something being true, we need to back that up by the actions that we take and the risks that we are willing to make. In fact, when you go back to chapter 11 of Hebrews and look once again at the list of people in the Hall of Faith, you see this pairing of faith and action over and over again. Noah believed. He believed that God was indeed going to send a flood, so he built an ark. Abraham believed the promise that God gave him, and so he left his home. Abraham believed that God would indeed bless Abraham and give him descendants as numerous as the stars in the heavens, and so he went and sacrificed Isaac. Moses believed that God was indeed going to rescue the Israelites, and so he left Midian and confronted Pharaoh. You see, again and again, this idea of having faith and that faith being paired with action. Rahab believed that God of Israel was the one true God, and therefore she took the action of siding with the Israelites, risking her life to rescue and to save the spies. Do you have faith in God? Do you believe that He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath? Then what are your actions that go along with that faith? In what areas of your life is God encouraging you to step out in faith, to take that risk, to make that decision that others are not making? What are the actions that God is encouraging you to take in your life to express the faith that God has given you? Second, Rahab's faith was a courageous faith. When we read today's story, we see that out of all the inhabitants of Jericho, and we don't know exactly how many people lived in the city at the time, but given the size of the city, some historians believe that there could have been upwards to tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the city. But out of all those people, according to the story, Rahab was the only one who put her faith in God. It's pretty easy to believe in something or someone and to take actions when everyone else around you also believes in the same thing. Right? When you're surrounded with like-minded people, when you're surrounded with others who also have the same belief as you, then it's not that hard to actually live out your faith and to put your faith into action. But when you're literally the only person in the entire city, the only person around that believes in something or someone, it takes tremendous courage to have that faith, to have that belief, and to act it out. And for us, as we live in our secular culture today, with fewer and fewer people believing in God and having the same faith that we do, it is becoming more and more difficult to stand up for what we believe in. More and more we see incidents or cases where Christians are being attacked, are being ridiculed and belittled because of their beliefs and the values that we have. And oftentimes we might feel like Rahab living in Jericho, where it feels like we are the only person that is willing to believe and to stand up for the things that we hold to be true. When you're in your workplace or at school, or maybe even in your homes, you may feel like Rahab, that you're all alone, and that you're the only one who believes in the things that you do. In Matthew 7, Jesus gives us this encouragement when he says, "Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." When we look at Rahab's faith, how she was able to stand up and take action in the midst of the entire city that was going the other way. As she was living amongst the people that were getting ready to oppose and to attack and try to battle against the God of Israel, the one true God that Rahab now came to believe in. It took tremendous and incredible courage for her to not just have that faith, but again, to put that faith into action. Now, as commendable and as incredible and courageous Rahab's faith is or was, I think at the end, I don't think it's really because we are to applaud Rahab and say, "Wow, Rahab, what an incredible person she was." I don't think this is the reason why the author of Hebrews listed her and others in this hall of faith. It's not so that we can kind of look up to them and say, "Those are incredible people. We need to become like Rahab." I mean, yes, to a certain extent, we should be inspired by these men and women of faith. We should be inspired by the courage that Rahab has shown in this story. But ultimately, we need to remember that faith itself is a gift from God. As we're reminded in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, "For it is grace, by grace you have been saved, through faith. And this faith, this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God." And so I asked myself this question, and maybe you ask yourself this question as well. Why was it, or how was it, that out of all the inhabitants of Jericho, Rahab was the only one who believed? I mean, was there something inherently special about Rahab? Was she the smartest person in the city? Likewise, why is it that out of the billions of people in this world, out of all the people in my workplace, in my school, and maybe even in my family, that I'm the only one who believes, who has faith? The fact that Rahab believed, the fact that you and I believe, the Bible says, is a gift from God. And not only is faith a gift from God, but also its end product, salvation. For we see that for Rahab, her faith in God leads to the salvation of her family from death and destruction. As she tied the scarlet cord in her window, which, by the way, is very reminiscent of the scarlet blood that was painted on the doorpost during Passover to save those who were inside the house. And as a consequence of her faith in the God of Israel, she and her family were spared from God's wrath and judgment. For us, our faith in God leads to our salvation from death and destruction. As a consequence of our faith in Jesus Christ and the blood that was poured out on the cross, we are spared from God's wrath and judgment that we deserve because of our sins. And so I believe the fact that Rahab's name is mentioned in this hall of faith in the book of Hebrews really is not because of what Rahab had done, but rather it's there as a story, as a testament to God's incredible mercy and grace. Her name and her story is about the magnitude and the depth of God's love and grace. Because you see, the story of Rahab reminds us that God's grace and love is for everyone, even those who are considered the enemy of his people. Romans 5 verse 10 tells us that for if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more now that we're reconciled, shall we be saved by his life. Rahab was a Canaanite. Canaanites were God's enemies, slated for destruction. In the same way, you and I are all born in this world as God's enemies, descendant of the sinner Adam. We have all rebelled. We're all opposed to him. And yet, God's incredible grace welcomes his enemies, welcomes you and I to become his people. The story of Rahab also reminds us that God does not simply spare our lives. It's not just, God saying, okay, fine, I'm not going to kill you. I'll let you live. But he goes beyond that. This story shows us that not only was Rahab and her family spared, but she was fully welcomed into the family of God. As some of you may know, Rahab eventually becomes the great, I like this other great there, grandmother of King David. Right? So her descendant is King David. And of course, as an ancestor of King David, she is also the ancestor to Jesus. Not only was Rahab's life spared, but she actually becomes a member of the royal family line of Israel. Like, this is an incredible transformation, right? A Canaanite woman, a foreigner, a prostitute, no less, is not only spared, is not only saved and delivered from death and destruction, but is welcomed into the community of God. And not just welcomed into the community, but becomes part of the royal family that eventually brings the Messiah, the Anointed One. This story reminds us that, God is kind of like the firefighter who not only rescues the child inside a burning house, right? So rescue the child and then brings the child safely outside. But once rescued, brings the child home to be adopted as his own. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, it says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praise of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." And that's exactly what God did for Rahab. She literally lived in darkness in that city of Jericho, slated for destruction. But God, out of his incredible love and mercy, chose her. And not just chose her, but made her become a member of the royal family, to become part of the holy nation of God, God's special possession. And her story and her name is forever to this day, declaring the praises of him who showed this incredible love and mercy. Yes, we need to have courageous faith that leads to action. Yes, we should aim to model and to try to be inspired by the faith, incredible faith that Rahab and others have demonstrated for us. But let us also remember that this faith is a gift from God. Let us reflect on this truly incredible gift that is available to everyone, even those who were once his enemies. Let us reflect on this gift that rescues us from certain death and not only saves us, but welcomes us into his own family as a son and daughter. At the end of the day, we are Rahab. We are the foreigner that were chosen out of his love and mercy. We are the foreigner that is being invited to be part of God's family. And for some reason, God has given each of us the faith to believe this message. Let us take the step of faith. Let us take courage that leads to action, that expresses this incredible gift that we have received from God. And it is my prayer for all of us that as we go through this week, as we go through our lives, that in everything that we do and that we say, that we would also be a testimony, a testament to God's incredible love and mercy that we share with others, that we declare to those around us.